Foundations are so important in our lives because they give us a platform which is stable and a platform which in most cases should be permanent. It's something that you build upon that you know is going to be there for the rest of time. And certainly it will stand the test of time. What kind of foundations are you building or rebuilding after the disruption of the COVID pandemic? My name is Reverend Kwame Rubadiri, and we're discussing the whole notion of the significance and importance of personal foundations in our lives. You're watching CITAM Church Online. Last week, we raised an interesting thought about the significance of foundations in our lives, not just because they're needed and necessary for the construction of any structure anywhere in the world, but more so in our own personal lives, as we saw in the story of the children of Israel when they returned from exile in Babylon. After 70 years, they come back, their nation is in disrepair. Most sadly, their place of worship, the temple, has been destroyed and has not been repaired. And now they're in the process, as we find in the book of Ezra in the Old Testament, in the process of rebuilding the house of God. And they begin with an interesting celebration because they don't wait until the temple is restored and finished and everything is ready in place for worship to begin. They start giving thanks to God right from the building of the foundation. Once the foundation is set in place, the Bible records that the people rejoiced. There was a huge celebration that took place because a solid foundation for the restoration of this place of worship had actually been planted. In the third chapter of the book of Ezra, we follow the story of the children of Israel, how they prepared themselves, how at the beginning of the chapter we even read how they were afraid of the people who were in the surrounding areas, and how they felt a little at ease about restoring their form of worship or their practice in worship because they were afraid of the people who lived around them, who had worshiping other gods of their own. But they went ahead anyway. They started their sacrifices on a daily basis in the morning and in the evening. And then towards the end of chapter 3, they start to build the temple. And so we read in the final two verses of chapter 3 an interesting event that takes place. We see how the Bible reads, "But many of the older priests and Levites and the family heads who had seen the former temple," this was 70 years prior and even older than that, "they wept aloud when they saw the foundation of this temple being laid, while many others shouted for joy." No one could distinguish the sound of the shouts of joy from the sound of weeping because the people made so much noise and the sound was heard far away. So a number of things happening here. We have what most people believe is a multi-generational approach to this. The older priests who saw what life was like and what the place of worship was like in the old days wept because here was the restoration. There was some who believed that they also wept because it seemed smaller than, not as glorious, not as grandiose as the former temple had been. But they wept nonetheless because they felt so moved that this place of worship was being restored. And some believe that the younger priests and those of younger generations were so filled with joy because now their place of worship, this centerpiece of their culture, was being restored. So as much as we saw last week, there was a restoration of connection. There was also a restoration of culture, kingdom culture, but also a recognition of the context in which they were now going to be serving God. One of the things that you and I recognize in our day-to-day these days is just how differently the various generations approach the things of God. We find a digital native culture that is really distracted in terms of their relationship to God, and they really need to build upon and find help from those who are the older generation who haven't had an experience with God which was not interrupted or distracted by the internet or by all of the other things in society and in our culture that seek to clamor for our attention. It is this connection, it is this context of coming together of the generations to help one another and to celebrate the connection to God, to help us rebuild in our foundations and the solidness and the firmness of those foundations going forward. The wonderful thing about the closing verse here is that this rejoicing, this coming together of these generations, this recognition of the restoration of their culture and reconnection to God was heard everywhere. It was heard a long, long distance. This amazing sound of worship and thanksgiving was heard a great distance away. And that's really should be the result of a building, of a structure that stands the test of time, built on a firm foundation. Our own lives, built on the firm foundation of God's word, should shine bright, should declare wherever we go, in whatever context we find ourselves. It should be heard far and wide that there is a wonderful witness of God's presence and power at work in us, because we have built on the solid foundation of His word and the connection to His promise. I pray that that will be your experience, and that whatever God does through your life, it will be a connection of your connection to, it will be a reflection of your connection to God, and also your connection to those around you who can help you grow and be part of the solid foundation of your faith in God. God bless you.